So you're trying to intimidate me? Acting like a bully. You're trying to get under my skin. My patience is wearing thin. And you're taunting me! And you're taunting me! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it right now! Stop it! Stop it right now! I'm just a little kid.
Welcome to atRecovery. This is Johnny B, and these are my opinions. I figured, one of the first places that we would probably want to start out talking about the atRecovery program or recovery in general, and be it atheistic or religious, would be kind of defining the goal, like the end goal of what it is that we're trying to strive for. And if that's to gain recovery, then I think it's important to define what recovery is going to look like so that we know when we actually get there. The literature in and of itself is actually really, really vague about what recovery is. And when I say the literature, what I'm referring to is the literature that I've been exposed to the most, which is the Big Book of AA and some of its other books like the 12 and 12, all of which I have read, and also the Narcotics Anonymous literature, the basic text, It Works How and Why. Be honest with you, those are the books that I stuck with. Those are the core of the program. I haven't really read anything outside of those in regards to the program. Now, of course, I've read other books. Which has allowed me to have insight, I believe, into the literature that I bring into my program, such as the Tao Te Ching, such as the Bible, such as the writings of great psychologists like Jung, Maslow, people that really attempted to understand people and to understand people so that they could help people live more fulfilling lives. I believe that even religious icons at one point were motivated by trying to address the human condition. Once again, air quotes. What is the human condition? These are things that we could spend entire lives talking about. But for today, I would like to explore some of my observations and concepts about what recovery looks like for me. And one of the first things I wanted to do was just kind of go through a really short couple of sentences that come out of some of the NA literature when it addresses recovery. So the first quote I'm going to read are out of one of the informational pamphlets, and it goes as follows. Many people think that recovery is simply a matter of not using drugs. They consider a relapse a sign of complete failure and long periods of abstinence as a sign of complete success. We, in the recovery program of Narcotics Anonymous, have found that this perception is too simplistic. Now, you would think that from there they go on to explain the complexities or maybe some of the characteristics of a recovered person or some of the observations they've had, or just maybe provide some type of permissive ideology that allows you to, go in and create your own idea of what recovery looks like. Like after they say that we in the recovery program Narcotics Anonymous have found that this perception is too simplistic, they might go on to say, we have discovered that trying to construct one idea of what recovery looks like is counterproductive, and to allow the individual to create their own experience of recovery is what's important. But once again, they don't. One of the things I love about the Tao Te Ching is that the Tao Te Ching, initially, when you read it, it says, this is not the answer. That's like in the very first couple of phrases. It says, this is not the answer. Recovery is not the Tao Te Ching. Enlightenment is not the Tao Te Ching. Recovery is not the literature. I wish that they would have done that, or at least really made an effort to convince people that the literature should not be confused with recovery, but that the literature can be a tool that allows you to recover and create meaning for yourself. To further confound things, later on in the same IP, it says, by the same token, we have observed some members who remain abstinent for long periods of time, whose dishonesty and self-deceit still prevent them from enjoying complete recovery and acceptance within society. Now, see, one of the things that I've always had an issue with really Narcotics Anonymous, but also Alcoholics Anonymous, is this desire to come into the fold, that being a member of society should be the end-all, be-all of human existence. And while I do agree that as great apes, we humans desire some form of community or tribe, and that it is genetically conditioned into us to have this instinctual need for community, I don't think that that's what life is about. You know, that's like saying life is about eating, that people's self-deceit has prevented them from drinking water, and so they're unhealthy. Yes, this is a very, actually, low-level facet. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I firmly agree with, acceptance, prestige, all of those things are necessary, but they don't involve any real complexity. Because when you get up to self-actualization, which is what Maslow said was the epitome of it all. So we have all these different opinions, of what is recovery. There's lots of different places that you can find recovery. I would say that most of our psychologists and our sociologists and our anthropologists would say that social acceptability does not equal recovery. Ironically enough, so does the NA literature when it infers by this very sentence that it kind of does. That the end all is to reach some type of social acceptability, and that if you gain that social acceptability, it's because you have obtained this quote-unquote recovery. So from someone who comes from a background of everything, one of the things that literally, like almost everything, biology, psychology, information technology, programming, creative design, graphic design, just about everything. I'm a freaking lunatic, and I really have a hard time staying focused on anything. So I don't consider it this huge benefit that I'm easily distracted. I'm like a freaking cat that is trying to attend college and just keeps like switching classes in the middle of the semester. But one of the things that it is a benefit for me is that it gives me a lot of different ways to approach a problem. And the problem here is, what is recovery? Well, from my IT backfield, I would say that to recover something, like if you want to recover a hard drive, if you want to recover a database, if you want to recover your operating system, it means that something happened to it. It was either damaged, taken, lost, destroyed, but somehow we need to get something back. That's what the word means. Recovery means to get something back. This is something that we always had at one point, that we had. Maybe not we always had. That's kind of nonsensical, because we wouldn't have to recover it if we always had it. But we had it at some point. We lost it, or it was taken away from us, which is my opinion, by society, which makes society the villain of our story, but that society, once again, I introduce every podcast with these are my opinions, society has stole something from us, taken something from us, or damaged something that was once at our core. Recovery, or the process of recovery, is a way to get back that which has been taken. And I don't think you can do that if your focus is to return to a society that rejected you. And it most likely rejected you because it couldn't damage you enough to fit in. And that's a long story that we'll get into over time. But in my opinion, recovery is about getting back something that was lost. And just like addiction and just like alcoholism, if you're going to work a program of whatever, if you're going to work a weight loss program, you need to understand what weight loss is. You can't like go, hey, I want to work this weight loss program. Then you come back a week later and you're like, I dyed my hair blue. And they're like, so what? And it's like, well, that was what I meant. I wanted to change my hairstyle. And they're like, that's not weight loss. You still need exercise. It's important to define what it is that we were striving for. What is it that we want? And in my opinion, it's really important to define that in a positive way. Once you get past that like initial fear of like, oh my God, I'm gonna die, that allows you to stay clean through all the withdrawals and maybe, motivates you through some of the uncomfortability of going to meetings or whatever it is that is your recovery process. It's time to start setting goals. What is it that I want? And that's another thing that we go a long time into. My point here under what is recovery in this particular section is that it needs a definition. You need to know an answer to that question. I need to know an answer to that question. I need to know what it is on a daily basis that I'm trying to achieve in my recovery. Air quotes. Recovery is I keep using air quotes when I'm referring to something that is a construct. So it's a label that we put on something or a classification that so we can talk about it and discuss what it is. It could be a pineapple. And then we all would kind of think what a pineapple was, but we could at least talk about the construct of pineapple. Or it could be, pineapple's a terrible example. It could be love or hope. These are all constructs. These are all ideas that have really nothing grounded in the physical. They're not pragmatic ideas that we can just say, oh, it's a pineapple, you big jerk. You know what a pineapple is. It's the combination between a pine cone and an apple. Oh my God, that just made sense now. Anyways, it doesn't taste like an apple. Whew. All right. The purpose of this is to kind of give you an idea of what my definition of recovery kind of looks like. I think I'm looking at my notes to see if I ever actually get into that. Not important. Plenty of time to cover that in the future. For me, recovery is something that continues throughout one's life. If you want to find greater meaning, it's like, to me, it's like you're a painter, okay? You're a painter. You continue that throughout your life because your paintings become better, become different. So I look at it like recovery is painting. But the canvas is your life, right? I mean, that just makes total sense to me. So maybe for a while your painting goes through cubism or abstract art. Or maybe you just go completely bananas and take up sculpting for a couple of years. Doesn't matter. The point is to find meaning, to quest for meaning, to create meaning. Another important aspect of recovery for me is that sobriety. is necessary but not sufficient. I think that's kind of what this whole IP was really trying to get at, is that it doesn't matter whether or not you're clean or not, but what are you doing with that clean or sober time or whatever the hell you want to call it that is making you, enjoy life more or frickin' whatever. That sobriety, one of the things we used to talk about in organic chemistry is that something is necessary but not sufficient, which means that you can't make it without it, but it's not going to make it happen. Need something else. And that something else could start out as the 12 steps. Or not. It's up to you. I tell people all the time, the 12 steps have no answers. They have questions. And what they do is that if worked, I hate to say the word correctly, but if worked in a way that resonates, now I sound like a mystic, but I don't mean resonates like a crystal. But anyways, if the 12 steps resonate with you, and if you do them in a way that resonates with you, then they'll ask you the right questions. Because all they're trying to do is get you to find the answers. And the answers are not in any literature that you're going to read. You can read the Bible, you can read the Tao Te Ching, you can read, Art of War, you can read the Big Book, you can read the basic text, you can read all of their frickin' books. There are no answers in there. None. Zero. Maybe a little bit of advice, Most of it's not really rocket science, like maybe you don't want to get drunk all the time to where you're throwing up and then try to drive your car. Not that I think that's actually in any of the literature. But my point being, is that the literature's role is to ask you questions so that you can find the answers within, because the answers are unique for everybody. One of the things that I really love about Taoism and the Eastern philosophies or theologies, I refer to them all as philosophies. You name me a theology, I'm going to say it's a philosophy. I don't go mythology. I think that there's some type of a philosophy in there somewhere. There's some lesson that was supposed to be learned, because I think people are far too dismissive of the word mythology. Stories kind of have longevity for a reason, because they teach us something about who we are, unconsciously or consciously. I think some people read literature and it unconsciously changes the way that they perceive themselves in the world around them. And then there's other people that go, I need to know how it works. Everyone that gets in a car and drives the car doesn't need to know what fuel injection is. Are perfectly fine with someone teaching them how to drive the car. But I'm the kind of guy that I'm like, okay, I need to know what the gas pedal does. Oh, well, it makes the car go faster. How? Well, it's complicated. I'm not dumb. Tell me. I think I might be able to grasp it. Because for me, that's the things that I find interesting, and that's where I find meaning, is not whether or not things work, but how things work. And that's why my approach to the 12 steps is very much about how I perceive things to work. And first thing that has to happen is we need to make definitions. Before we do anything else, we need to know what recovery is and some other definitions that we'll go over. But what is recovery? What is our goal? What are we doing here? That's really what we need to get at. And that's, in my experience, that's a lifetime process. And recovery doesn't always look like recovery. So the 12 steps can lead you to recovery, but they aren't necessarily recovery. Other things can lead you to recovery. These are my opinions. I like not doing dope. I like not drinking. I like being quote unquote sober or quote unquote clean. I personally like and prefer my life that way. That's why I do it. Not because I'm terrified of the alternative. No, because I like John when he's not on substances. I enjoy his company more. If that makes any sense. So, If you feel like you're lost without recovery, then you probably don't have any. Oh, I love to like put together things that on their surface are contradictory. If you feel like you need recovery, like recovery is something that you have to have in order to be complete, then you'll probably never find recovery. I mean, who says complete is a positive thing? You know, like we talk about this hole. You have this hole that you keep trying to fill up. Maybe you're supposed to have a hole. Maybe there is no filling it up. Maybe that isn't what recovery is about. Maybe recovery is about experiencing the hole. I don't know. Well, I mean, I know what I believe, but I think it's sophomoric to think that we just need to go around filling holes with whatever. And that, oh, well, there's good things to fill it with and there's bad things to fill it with. You know, if you ever read the Tao Te Ching, it'll totally change your perception of good and bad, because there is no such thing as good and bad. It's just all about experiences. So for me, when I'm questing for something, I probably am moving further away from it. You know, a lot of us have seen this when it comes to relationships or dating. You know, the harder we try to find somebody, the further away we seem to be going. I need to remember not to spend a whole lot of time trying to do recovery and just being recovery. Bam! Tao Te Ching drop! Well, actually, that's also Maslow. There's being love. Being recovery is not something that requires energy. Anyways, eventually I came to realize that I am recovery, that recovery is within me. And I'm not going to go into a huge explanation about that, because that, for me, is broken down in the 12 steps. Recovery is John. And that sounds weird because we hear so much stuff. If you actually attend meetings, you hear so much stuff about how we're the problem. I don't necessarily agree with that. One of the things you're going to have to learn really quick is that I disagree with a lot of the literature. It doesn't mean that I don't like the literature. It gives me lots of stuff to disagree with. But there's lots of stuff I do agree with, or there's lots of stuff that make me think, and I go and I look and I think and I ponder, and then I find, okay, well, I think that this is what it is actually trying to get at with what it's saying. I don't think Jimmy Keenan was a moron. I don't think Bill Wilson was a moron. I don't think any of the people that wrote or contributed to that literature was a moron. And I don't think that they lacked self-reflection, or that they lacked depth. I don't think that Jimmy K, Bill Wilson, the other founders of the fellowships, I don't think that they lacked depth. I think that they were a product of their environment and of their time. And just like people who try to walk around quoting the Bible like it pertains to the internet, you have to take a contemporary look at a literature that was made a while ago. And then you have to translate it into your own language. You know, so for me, that's recovery. For me, recovery is also the art of not believing the literature. No. But no, finding your own interpretations of the literature. Finding things that resonate with you. Defining them in ways that resonate with you. Allowing them to look at you and to challenge you. And, you know, that to me is not the process of recovery. That is recovery. I think recovery is that curiosity that we had as children, that we wanted to go out and explore and interact. Not just because we found everything fascinating, but because every time, you know, we did something, we learned something about ourselves. You go water skiing. Holy cow, I can glide on top of water. Now, I'm the jackass that wants to know the physics behind it, but as a kid, probably, I don't know, I was just like, wow, this is really freaking cool. John plus water skis plus water equals cool stuff happening. Lots of fun. I couldn't have done that if I hadn't had the experience of water skiing. Now you can take that kind of algorithm and apply it to anything as long as you're following your passion. That is recovery, in my opinion. Recovery is fearlessness and a fearless approach to the universe. So, in summation, for me, recovery is basically getting back something that was lost. For me, it's that childlike sense of wonderment. I was a kid that used to love to climb trees. I was basically indestructible until, I broke enough bones, and then I stopped climbing trees. And I'm actually afraid of heights. It's something I work on. But the kid me wasn't afraid of heights. Kid me wasn't afraid of death. Death didn't even exist to that person. Now, granted, as you get older, you start understanding that death exists and it gives life meaning. But that doesn't mean that we completely abandon that fearlessness that we had as children, that almost stupidity that we had about the universe before we started learning about the universe and then judging the universe. One of the most difficult things I deal with is that children don't judge. I could go on and on. That's judgment. That would be a great podcast thing. Another thing that we kind of touched on was that the religious model is basically this kind of way to try to find that childish parental kind of overseeing, that the individual is protected. That fearlessness comes from this belief that the individual is protected or cared for, and that was kind of where that childish mentality came from. I could climb a tree 500 feet in the air because if something happens, my parents will take care of it. And then you injure yourself out there in the world, and you get your first bill from the hospital, and you're like, can you just re-break the bone? Because that would be less painful. Yeah. Oh, wait, now I can afford this. No, you start realizing that your childhood life is not, unfortunately, much of a preparation for the real world. But some people try to believe in a God that has some plan. And for them, the recovery process, now this is not that type of program. This is an atheistic form of recovery. But that type of process, what it does is it builds a relationship, a trust with this entity that allows them, if they believe, to recover that sense of safety, to recover that sense of peace. But the important component here that people don't seem to grasp is that you have to believe. You can't fake it. If you fake it till you make it, that's fine for going to meetings. But if you're faking praying for years on end, you don't believe. And so you need to find another way. I was still terrified until I finally ran across somebody, and I was like fixing to go through this whole step process with them again, and we got down to the whole, well, what about the God thing? And I was like, man, I've tried praying, I've tried all of this, all the things that people have suggested. I've tried it. I've got down on my knees with my sponsor before and prayed, and I've always thought it was kind of pointless. My logical brain tells me that there's no truth in that. How could there be? And I could go into that, but that's not what this is about. This is about recovery, defining what recovery is. For you, for me, for the individual. And fortunately, he was like, yeah, I don't believe in that either. And I was like, well, how do you do this, this, and this? And he was like, well, if you want to work with me for a little bit, I'll show you. And then I kind of took his information, and I took information from people previous, because I'm not just regurgitating what I've heard. That's the funny thing about the atRecovery program, or the way that I present the atRecovery program, is that it challenges the individual to create new stuff. It's like we go to these meetings and they're like, well, I didn't make any of this up. And I'm like, why not? Haven't you thought about it? And maybe something different, new would come to mind. Well, because I'm not that good, man, stuff. But how do you know the guy you heard it from was? Because shut up. That's a typical conversation I have. Anyways, so yeah, as opposed to the religious model that kind of keeps us in that infantile, childish mentality that allows people to basically act like children. And that's a little harsh, but if you look around, you're going to start going, oh yeah, I guess a 4-year-old would kind of act like that. And I guess that doesn't make really any sense why people behave like that. Like I said in another podcast, just look at frickin' Black Monday. Those are children. Those are little babies, fighting over the toys. Those aren't human beings. That's not humanity. That's what happens with humanity when you repress them and when you don't allow them to find recovery. When you don't, and I'm using recovery as a construct again, when you don't allow them to discover themselves as individuals. As individuals, we can work together. But regardless, the problem is that recovery in the adult model requires a transformative experience. Even in that old book, they say that when I was a child, I thought like a child and I acted like a child. And now as an adult, blah, blah, blah. It's not a direct quote. In all honesty, to me, what that means is that there's a transformative experience. That transformative experience is when I gain power to change my destiny. That's all it means. Doesn't mean that I stop playing with action figures. If I like frickin' action figures, I can play with them. If it's part of my frickin' job, I can play with them. If my job is to be creative, I may have action figures, or I may go to Comic-Con and dress up like superheroes. And that is not being childish, especially if my brain's telling me that I shouldn't do that because people are going to judge me. Childish is the person who goes, I can't wear green today because people will think that green's bad and that I'm bad and that I smell like poopy pants. Another observation that I've made in the time that I've been doing this is that pain is not always the absence of recovery. Sometimes pain is the presence of recovery. A lot of people go, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. I must have been doing something wrong. And I'm like, why? I mean, why would you think that? You don't think that your pain is always about something wrong? Anybody, I haven't had I got dogs, and we all worry about, I had a dog that ran away for a while, for like 10 days, thought he was dead. It was a very painful experience. But I don't think that meant that I needed to work on getting over the blah, 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 or like I just wasn't trusting God or blah, blah, blah. Just mean that I like my dog. Just meant that I like my dog that's barking right now, outside, and annoying everybody. But I love him because he's awesome. So pain is not always the absence of recovery. Pain is not always an indicator that we're doing something wrong. Sometimes pain is an indicator that we're doing something right. And avoidance of pain has often led people to do many things that are wrong. So recovery is going to involve pain. That's a fact. That's a fact. And it's not when things are going wrong. It's like, I'm in pain. I must be doing it wrong. Nah, probably doing it right. Lots of interesting stuff to talk about. And finally, nobody can teach you recovery. Nobody. Nobody can teach you recovery. It's not possible. We're basically guides, mirrors. If anyone tells you that you're doing something wrong, you can then ask them, how do you know? You see people's journey in recovery a lot of times, from what I've seen, they get in some pain and then they start looking for answers from people. And when they receive an answer they don't like, or they don't seem to make sense to them, the person giving the advice is like, well, how's it working for you now? You don't know. You can't see into the future. Just because I'm in pain right now because of some stupid relationship or whatever, doesn't mean that I'm not on the right path. That's ridiculous, you know? So as soon as someone starts throwing your pain at you, like, you know, one of the things I hate the most is when you share something painful or when you share a problem that you have, and then later on, you know, you'll be like, well, blah, 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 I'm in so much pain and I don't know what to do. And then they bring up this thing that you told them and you're like, well, no, actually, I'm okay with that. But now that you brought it up, yeah, it sucks too. It's not good. Thanks. You know, we are literally here to prop each other up. That's what a good support group does. Do we call each other out? I don't know. I think you have some people in your life that's their job. But now we're getting more into support groups and sponsors. But you need to define, or I discovered that I needed to define for myself what I wanted out of this life. Not this 12-step program, not this book on all the meanings of the universe. What did I want out of this? And after 10 years of going in and out of pain, and another 5 years of going in and out of severe pain, and times of happiness and times of loneliness, I discovered that the absence of pain is not a good goal. It's okay to find happiness. It's okay to find love and all these wonderful emotions, but just simply trying to avoid pain by using steps like, oh, these steps are going to work like heroin and I won't hurt anymore. No, you're a human being. You're supposed to hurt. We all hurt. Some of the most beautiful things that we have ever created have been created out of pain and our desire to express that pain. Recovery, I would say recovery for me is about learning to be human, learning to be a person. Recovery for me is learning to be John, because like I said, when I was a kid, I was John. Now, as an adult, I need to recover that ability to just be John. That's what recovery means to me. Okay, so, well, I hope you got something out of that. If you would like to, if you're on YouTube and you would like to subscribe and do all that fun stuff, you can go by my website also, which is at atheisticrecovery.com. That's atheisticrecovery.com. It's a form of recovery, not a classification of people. Even though I am an atheist, it's like atheistic self-defense classes where you don't use the power of God to defend yourself. Oh, my goodness. He's such a weirdo. No. No. Okay. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and like, subscribe, come by my website, go to my YouTube channel. I got a Facebook page. All that stuff is somewhere and stuff and descriptions and whatever. Just go to atheisticrecovery.com and you can find a lot of my information. You know, I hope that maybe somebody got something out of something that I may have said intentionally or by accident. Yeah, thanks for coming by. And you have a wonderful
My patience is wearing thin.
day.
And you're taunting me! And you're taunting me! Stop it, stop it, stop it! Stop it right now! Stop it! Stop it right now!
big. Do you think that what you did would bring you back to this?